Psebay is a small settlement in Krasnodar Krai. This is the homeland of Mount Gerpidjem, whimsical boulders, a cliff that has taken the shape of a woman's figure, a waterfall, the dreams of pure springs, and many other picturesque creations of nature. However, on May 14th, 2018, here among the bushes that had just begun to bloom, something terrible was discovered. Something that clearly stood out from the usual landscape of this area, which reflected the harmony of life. Late at night, the residents of a house located on Pervomaiskaya Street woke up to piercing screams. On holidays, loud shouts and arguments often echoed in the area, but this was not a holiday, and the screams were nothing like usual. It sounded more like a plea, addressed to no one in particular. An agitated female voice, breaking through tears, pleaded, don't, please, don't." And then she fell silent, and in her place came some strange sounds, almost inhuman, resembling either a wheeze or a growl. Tatiana Mikhailovna, who couldn't step away from the window, as if she were a television screen showing a horror movie, finally gathered her courage and called the police. What happened there, not far from their house in the dark thickets of trees and lush bushes, was frightening because of its mystery. The police car stopped right at the entrance of the building. Several residents, intrigued by the gruesome incident, headed to the mysterious place following the detectives. Tatiana's heart fluttered anxiously in her chest, and in her imagination, frightening images of the heroes from local legends flashed by: the evil witch, the mysterious creature from Witch's Lake, and the shapeshifters. The police officers walked ahead, lighting the area, which was once more falling asleep, with their flashlights. Suddenly, the beam of one of the flashlights fell on an object that looked like a woman's shoe. It was hidden on a small rise in the bushes. The search party began to approach the suspicious object. As the police officers reached the hillock, their flashlights trembled in their hands, causing the beams to jump nervously over the leaves. A shoe, scattered clothes, a bag, a mobile phone, all of it was covered in crimson stains. Nearby lay the body of a woman, as indicated only by the particular features of the body's structure. Her head looked as if it had been dipped in a vat of blood. Her face had turned into a pulp. Everything on it in life was replaced by small abrasions and large wounds. Someone had smashed the woman's skull, torn her mouth, and cut off part of her ear. However, the most terrifying thing could be noticed by looking a little lower. Under the lifted t-shirt, the only piece of clothing.
On the victim,
there was a large hole in the abdomen, and from this hole, internal organs were protruding. A torn loop of intestine was wrapped around one of the legs. Areas of skin on the torso were covered with numerous hematomas. Next to the lifeless body, among the sharp-tipped blades of grass, lay a large stone with traces of blood and fragments of a woman's hair. After such a sight, none of the eyewitnesses, awakened by desperate screams long ago, could get back to sleep. One question echoed in their minds: who did this? But since it would take time to answer it precisely, the inner monologue of each witness dissolved into the morning chirping of crickets. Sometime later, not far from where the body was found, they discovered a drunk guy lying right on the grass. At first, he was detained but then released. The police officers decided that he was not involved in this crime. In the following days, the victim's identity was determined. Natalia Dmitrieva, 40 years old, mother of 5 children, 4 boys and 1 girl. When she was still very young, she was a homemaker, caring, hardworking, and pleasant to talk to. That's how her acquaintances described her in a few words. And Natalia was also creative. She embroidered pictures with beads and ribbons, did floristry, and devoted almost all her time to her children. Natalia's family lived in harmony and friendship. Her husband, Alexei, was a driver who also helped with household chores in his free time. But in an instant, the world changed utterly for him and all the deceased woman's relatives.
Strange, hostile.
Alexei suffered a heart attack and was hospitalized after discovering his beloved wife had passed away. None of the residents of Psebay who came into contact with this story, or who personally knew the victim, could comprehend who, why, and for what reason someone could so monstrously murder a mother of many children. Surveillance cameras could have helped to find this out. That evening, the last in her life, Natalia planned to spend at the Ivushka cafe in the company of a friend. It was important for the investigators to observe the woman after she left the establishment. In fact, suspicious people appeared in the frame at the very moment when Natalia had barely stepped over the threshold of the cafe. In the recording, she was with two guys whose identities were easily established, not alone or with a girlfriend. They were 16-year-old Maxim Bondarenko and his friend, 20-year-old Savely Nikiforov. However, the residents of Psebay were convinced that many more people were involved in the attack on Natalia. The thing is, both Maxim and Savely were members of a local criminal gang and had been terrorizing the entire settlement for a long time. Guys like that often started noisy fights, abused alcohol, committed thefts and acts of violence. They had a lot of unhealthy entertainments, for example, running into a cafe and practicing wrestling moves on drunk visitors. There were rumors that they were involved in an unsolved crime that became known a year earlier. At that time, a man's body with signs of violent death was found in the ravine. However, proving this was impossible, just as proving someone else besides the two suspects abused Natalia. Only they appeared in the footage. Maxim and Savely were arrested, under police pressure. They confessed that the responsibility for what happened to Natalia lay with them. Soon, the crime details became clear. In the evening of May 13th, the woman was planning to meet a friend at a cafe. Her husband allowed her to go, saying she spent all day with the kids at home and could barely remember her last break. Natalia agreed. Both on weekdays and weekends, she spent her time on household chores. She took care of 2-year-old Ira, helped the other children with their homework, cooked meals, and regularly cleaned the house. Like most women, despite having a lot of responsibilities, she remained cheerful and optimistic. When she had the chance to take a break from her tiring routine, Natalia, of course, took advantage of it. They chatted with Vera about life and shared news, sinking into the cozy chairs of the cafe. They felt like a complete company and didn't need anyone else's company. However, about halfway through the conversation, two guys, almost teenagers, joined the women. Natalia knew one of them. He was her son's classmate. She met the other one at the cafe. Savely, who was twice as young as her, invited Natalia to dance. And deciding that the boundaries of personal space between them had already smoothly disappeared, he switched to a familiar tone. Natalia didn't like this at all, and she made a remark to the cheeky young man, to which he responded quite appropriately. When the clock hands had already struck midnight, the whole group, in a half-drunk state, left the cafe. Vera and Natalia split up near Ivushka's porch, but Maxim and Savely weren't going to leave so readily. Releasing large clouds of boozy fumes into the air, they followed Natalia, expressing a desire to walk her home. Glancing at the dark streets, partially lit by a few lanterns, the woman agreed, but she could not have imagined what would happen next. The danger was not in the mist. Taking the shape of two shadows on the asphalt, the danger calmly walked beside her. Literally, a few meters from the house where Natalia lived, her young companions became absolutely savage. They picked up a large stone from the ground and began to hit her on the head. They hit hard with anger and fury, a full 12 times, until nothing was left of the face of the once beautiful blue-eyed woman. But that was not all. After the beating, the sadists took turns abusing the victim, and after almost an hour of torment, they decided to finish her off by throwing a rope around the poor woman's neck. Natalia convulsed and gasped, but it was pointless to fight. Finally, recalling a scene from a movie, which, as the criminals later admitted, they had watched several times, Maxim and Savely slit the woman's abdomen and tore out her intestines. Still unable to recover from the deep moral shock, accompanied by physical nausea caused by the details of the crime that everyone was talking about, the residents of Psebay demanded the harshest punishment for the murderers. Almost 5,000 people attended the rally, and 15,000 signed a special petition. And this initiative was supported not so much by the desire to properly punish the guilty, but rather to punish them in general. The thing is, Maxim Bondarenko was known not only for his bad reputation, but also for certain privileges. His father held a prestigious position, heading one of the departments of a large woodworking plant. That's why he always and everywhere covered for his son, who was used to getting away with everything. 500,000 rubles, and Maxim successfully avoids any punishment. That's how things were done in their family. The sleeping guy who was found on the night of May 14th next to Natalia's body was Maxim himself, and everyone without exception understood why he was released so quickly. But this time, public outrage was so strong that no connections at the top could cover for him. Maxim Bondarenko was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Until he turned 18, he served his sentence in a juvenile correctional facility, and then he was transferred to a general regime colony. Savely Nikiforov was given a different sentence, 19 years in a high-security prison. Alexei Dmitriev, Natalia's husband, considered the sentences too lenient and demanded a life sentence, at least for the adult Nikiforov. It's still hard for him to remember those terrible days in May. On the disfigured red and blue face of the still young woman, whom they initially even wanted to hide from her relatives by burying Natalia in a closed coffin, the mark of fear was forever frozen. The house risked crumbling without the craftswoman, homemaker, and nurturing mother and wife holding it together. But it was the residents of the settlement who helped the Dmitrievs cope with their grief, both morally and materially. After some time, a new woman appeared in the family. She couldn't replace Natalia, but she supported Alexei and helped him raise the children. Zhenya and Dima, the older sons, graduated from school with gold medals and continued to succeed. The two younger ones are still in school, but they are already making big plans for the future. The only girl among the children, the youngest one, recently started first grade. In general, each member of this family has their own dreams, hopes, and memories, most of which, despite the small joys of everyday life, are connected with timelessness.
With the late Natalia,